employment law, featured on CNN Money, consistently ranked as a top 10 tier employment attorney by Expertise Connections, a human resources consultant, expert, and advocate. Informational, inspirational, and entertaining. One of the most talked about and progressive shows on social media. Legal Views with attorney Sheila R. Stuart.
Welcome to Legal Views with attorney Sheila R. Stuart. We are so excited to have you back with us for our new season. And we could not kick off our new season with a better guest, the one and only Bishop Edwin C. Bass. He has written an exciting new book that would assist us in marital counseling, marital questions, and he is going to discuss this great book. This book is on fire across the United States of America. If you have questions and concerns about your marriage, or you are contemplating marriage, you want to get this great book. But before we get started with Bishop Bass, let me tell you a little bit about the show. You are listening to Legal Views, and we are currently airing on Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, Daily Gospel Network, and Daily Gospel International. We are also streaming live on Facebook. You can find us under our YouTube channel, Legal Views with attorney Sheila R. Stuart. And you can follow us on Facebook under the Law Office of Sheila R. Stuart. I want to share some background about Bishop Bass. Bishop Bass is a transformational leader. He's doing a great work here in the St. Louis metropolitan area, but his work is impactful not only in St. Louis, but also in Spain. He is the jurisdictional prelate of the emerging jurisdiction of Spain. And he's just full of knowledge and information. And we're going to allow Bishop Bass to share some of these great things with you. Bishop Bass has been married. Now listen to this. For 52 years. 52 years he has been married. So we know he is not a novice and he is prepared to discuss this subject. And he recently renewed his marital vows in September of 2023 on a cruise. And he invited 100 plus friends to cruise with him to the Dominican Republic, where he renewed his wedding vows to the beautiful lady Jessie Bass. What a wonderful event that was. Bishop Bass is not only a husband and a father, he is a graduate of Colgate University, Hamilton, New York. He attended his graduate work and did his graduate work in India. He's a retired senior vice president of sales and marketing for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and he has served as the pastor and founder of Empowered Church of God in Christ for over 30 years. That ministry continues to flourish and grow. He was also recently elected to the Judiciary Board of the Church of God in Christ, and we are so proud of him. He is doing a wonderful job. He has served on numerous boards, including the Transitional House, the Hope House, Lindenwood University, Urban League St. Louis, and the United Way of Greater St. Louis. He has worked in many different capacities. And the book that he is going to discuss today is So You Want to I Want to Be Married. So You Want to Marry Me. And we're going to go into this in detail. But he's also authored another book called I Won't Be Silent Anymore. He is the father of Sean, Craig, and Courtney, and the grandparents of King, Paige, and Hannah. Welcome, Bishop Bass. How are you today?
Great, Attorney Stuart, and thank you so much for the privilege of appearing on your well-known show. What an honor it is to be invited. And all is well. My beautiful wife is sitting here with me as we prepare to go into a discussion about the book.
Well, she's welcome to jump on.
I don't think she'll want to do that right now, but she just always by my side.
Okay, well, God bless you, Lady Bass, and we are glad to have you in the room with us on today. It's always good to have them near, have your lovely companion near. Now, Bishop Bass, what did you see that provoked you to write this book? What hit your spirit to tell this story?
Well, what I saw emerged from my experience as a pastor, marrying people and finding out within literally weeks of the time I married them that they ended up in marriage counseling again. Issues emerged in some cases that really resulted ultimately in divorce. I looked over the number of marriages and I was not happy with my success rate. A year, 2 years down the road after marriage, a lot of divorces. And so I changed my whole outlook on pre-marriage counseling and developed a process which has resulted in much higher success rates. And this book is my attempt to share what I learned and what I began to put into practice with a broader community.
Excellent, excellent. I love it. I love it. And if you were to give us a tip right now on maintaining a marriage for 52 years, that is just astounding. What would that tip be?
Well, I think the critical part is when you start the marriage, you have to go into the marriage with the commitment that you're going to stay together till death you part. And I think the other thing is communication. Certainly, every marriage has challenges that arise, but as long as you can communicate and talk them through, and you can move forward and stay together. There are financial struggles that come in marriage, raising children, all the issues that come around marriage, but it's important to have communication. And it's important, I think, to not only have that person as a spouse, but also as a friend. And I think in that capacity, you increase your likelihood of having a long-term marriage.
What advice would you provide for older people who are contemplating marriage and that have never been married before? It's kind of scary because you have to, come together with a person after you've been single for so many years. What advice would you offer to individuals like myself?
Well, I would offer this advice to everybody, but perhaps I would say that I would put even greater emphasis on it for people who marry later in their life, and that is it is incredibly important that there are critical issues that have to be discussed prior to marriage. Prior to marriage is the time when there is disagreement. There's a likelihood that the two will work together to come out with a compromise and a way forward. After marriage, it becomes very difficult. As you get older, I think you become more firm in your outlook on life, what's important to you. And so it's important, I think, that person you contemplate marriage knows where you are, what you're thinking, and the critical questions in this book, I think, are critical questions that really need to be discussed in detail. And I would say, again, the older you get, probably the more you need to get clarity around this situation, because I would expect that there's probably less flexibility as you get older in terms of what you're willing to live with or not live with.
Okay, excellent. And what about the younger couples? Younger couples, they start off in a marriage, and many of them, they have this struggle, financial struggle. They have young kids, and when the man first met her, when she first met him, and they looked a certain way and they loving on each other. Now she's had children and they're struggling and they're growing apart. What advice would you give to these younger couples?
Well, I think expectations should be set before the marriage. And again, I think these questions in this book, these topics for discussion, set expectations. One of the questions in there, it deals with the fact, do you recognize that your spouse appearance is likely to change as they grow older? It's important to understand that and expect that. Many people have unrealistic expectations of marriage, and this sounds really crazy, but they think they're going to look the same and the person's going to look the same for the remainder of their life. That's unrealistic. And I think it's those kinds of things that need to be anticipated and understood that they will happen, as opposed to going in with this naive approach that everything is always going to be wonderful. I think, and again, the questions here are very difficult questions, and not easily discussed. And I believe in some cases, but I believe that the payback for really talking these things through and getting an understanding of what the situation is going into the marriage, what's likely to happen down the road in the marriage, how will we handle these kinds of things? It makes a difference. The person that has children, perhaps
Mhm.
one of the persons getting married have children. I've experienced much conflict in marriage counseling over that issue because they were so in love that they never even took the time to discuss issues like, will the other person be allowed to correct that child? What is the role of this new person in the life of my child? What's the role of the father or the mother who are no longer in relationship? What's their role? Those kind of things really need to be discussed in detail, and I believe even documented. So this questionnaire provides something that can be referred to even as issues arise in the marriage. They can go back to what they discussed in the beginning and use that as a basis, to go forward.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Now, you know, we're living in a day to in a society now where many individuals have come out of different sexual identities prior to meeting someone that they want to marry. So now they want to get married. How would you, what information would you give to a person in terms of getting information about one's sexual identity prior to
Well,
marriage?
there's a question in here that asks that specifically, and it asks from the perspective that you need to know the person you are marrying. As a Church of God in Christ pastor, my position on things such as homosexuality are very clear. However, people end up in marriages where they did not know that that person had that inclination or from that perspective. I think that those things need to be discussed clearly up front in the hopes that there will be clarity around that so that people don't enter into relationships that are contrary to their best interest or their belief system. Certainly, as a father of a daughter, as a father of sons, I would like them as a grandfather of two granddaughters and one grandson. I would like them to enter into a heterosexual relationship, and I think they need to make sure that in the courting stage, as they are dating, as they prepare to get married, if they're contemplating marriage, that question is on the table and they get a clear answer on that specific question.
Okay. Do you think counseling, how impactful do you think the premarital counseling is?
I think it's very impactful because it brings issues come to the table
I'm sorry.
in the excitement of getting married and the excitement of all the things that surround marriage, the picking of the gown, the tuxedos, what will the reception be like? Where are we going to go on our honeymoon?
Mhm.
Critical questions are not answered. In fact, most people focus on things that are somewhat unimportant and won't in the future have much impact. I think pre-marriage counseling forces the individuals to confront critical questions that must be answered before. Because again, I'll say this, where there's a need for compromise, where there's a need for resolution of an issue, uh, it is best done before marriage. And many times in my counseling, marriage counseling after marriage, I found out that people feel a sense of betrayal when things come up that they didn't know about. For example, I've had one situation where one of the married couple found out the other person had an enormous amount of debt, and they found out after marriage and was extremely upset about it.
Mm. I
That
get it.
question should be discussed prior to marriage. Now, that person's debt might not have changed prior to marriage, but the other person had the option of deciding, do I still want to go forward in this marriage with the knowledge that this person carries that debt? So now, if they agree to go forward with it, when it comes up later, and it has, and even when it comes in marriage, as a counselor, I can remind them that this is not new information. You knew it, you agreed to it. But my job becomes very difficult when the person didn't know that and enters into that marriage and they come into my office. It's really hard to bring them to resolution of that issue.
That would be very difficult. How would, I mean, that's an interesting scenario when an individual meets someone, marry that person, and then after they are married, now all of these secrets emerge.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle a marriage with all of these new secrets emerging from a person that did not disclose any of this information?
Can I answer that question two ways?
Sure, absolutely.
By pre-marriage counseling, you minimize that happening after marriage. And that to me is really what I'd like to focus on, what I do focus on, disclosing information prior so that the person deciding to move forward moves forward with clear understanding. However, realistically, that does not always occur, and people come in the office. And again, it's very difficult. It depends on that person's perspective. For some people, again, I go back to the example of a debt. For some people, that's a deal breaker. They can't go forward with that. That was a violation of their ability to have confidence in that person. And sometimes it simply cannot be worked out. And I picked that issue, but there are many other issues. Children that have been disclosed after the marriage, criminal records that have been disclosed after the marriage. Anything disclosed after the marriage can be interpreted as somebody intentionally holding back that information, and it becomes very difficult to have trust going forward.
Absolutely, especially a criminal record and debt, children that you're not aware of. Those could be deal breakers.
Right.
Even with counseling, they can still be deal breakers if the individual finds out later.
And sometimes, Attorney Stuart, it's a deal breaker before marriage. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. If they find out something that they cannot in honesty move forward with, wouldn't it be better to know that before they get married than after marriage and have to go through all the technical difficulties, all the legal difficulties of divorce and separation? So sometimes in the course of this counseling, and I have some case studies in here. I have an example of a couple who actually decided after they went through all the questions that they had irreconcilable differences, and they both came in very calmly and said that they decided not to move forward with the marriage. To me, that was successful because it's all, in all likelihood, they would have been back in my office in a relatively short time with very heated exchanges, and ultimately may have led to divorce, likely would have led to divorce. So to me, it is successful. The premarital counseling should also determine whether or not a couple should move forward and how they're going to move forward and what they're going to do. In this book and in my counseling, I require, before I will actually perform a marriage now, the couple has to exchange credit reports. They have to exchange police reports. I don't want to see them and don't ask to see them, but they have to verify to me that they shared that information with each other. I think to the extent people enter into marriage with understanding, with information, no surprises later on, the stronger that marriage is, and the greater the likelihood of it enduring over time.
So do these individuals actually participate in the exchange of information?
They do. There literally is a questionnaire that let me just run through the process. There's a questionnaire that they fill out and share with each other. Okay. And I give them a time frame to share the answers to that, and they sit down and agree. And there's a form there that identifies where they have issues that they've not been able to resolve, if they have them. The first line is for the couple to work through and come to an agreement. When they cannot, then they identify those issues and bring them into counseling. And I work with them to try to help them come to some agreement on how they will deal with those issues moving forward. If they decide to move forward. So it gives them an opportunity to really have a down to earth. And let me tell you, these discussions can be very painful, but the greater your investment in the front end, the greater your profitability in your marriage will be on the back end. The more you can resolve these issues going forward and agree on them. So one example in here is a couple, the lady in the marriage had a son. And she wanted her new husband to not have any dealings with her son in terms of correcting him. That was a deal breaker for him. He felt like if he was going to be in his house with him that he had to have some kind of role. They worked through painfully and came to an agreement on how he was going to interact with her son, how she was going to interact with her with the father of her son going forward. They worked out that agreement prior to the marriage. Can you imagine trying to work that out after the marriage?
Yeah, that would have been most difficult. That's
Right.
a good question. And I did read the book. It's an excellent book. It has excellent exercises in it. And I recommend that anyone is married or contemplating married, I recommend that they would read this book thoroughly. And I did read it and I enjoyed it. I want to expand on that scenario that you just used with the man and the woman. When couples get married, the husband is supposed to be first, the wife is supposed to be first, right? That's what we say, that no one comes before the husband and the wife. How do you balance that if the couple already have children? So she has a child, he has a child. Are they still first?
Well, that's an interesting question, and that again is how the couple works through what will work in their marriage. But I can tell you, in most marriages, those children are going to be at the top of the list. And so when they enter into a new marriage, much consideration has to be made to how those children are going to go forward. Particularly, I think fathers feel strongly, but mothers even feel more strongly about this. So again, I think it's important to talk it through to get an understanding so that expectations are met. So if somebody enters into a marriage with this expectation that I'm going to marry this woman and every decision she's going to make is going to be about me first, that's first of all highly unrealistic. But secondly, I think what it creates a great potential for confusion down the road. That issue has to be discussed in detail. Let me give you another example. In most marriages, you have two families. The wife has a family and the other have a family. So one of the questions is, how do you deal with a request for a loan from a member of your family? How are we going to handle that?
Okay.
That has to be discussed. I've seen so many conflicts over that issue that the other person's unhappy because their spouse is loaning money to their family and it's impacting the home. So I lay out every scenario that I can think of that I've experienced and seen in counseling, and I put it in the form of discussion so that they can come to agreement on how they're going to handle that particular situation. How are you going to handle children that were brought into the marriage? How are you going to handle finances? How are you going to handle if one of the person wants to go back to school? How is it going to be paid for? How are you going to handle if one person doesn't want to work? And how are you going to handle it if one person wants to work and the other person doesn't want them to work? Those are all questions that have to be discussed and agreed upon going in, because it becomes very difficult after the marriage to bring resolution to those issues. And I just picked a scattering of the questions, but there are numerous questions around that again, I've experienced in conflict. So this book is written for more than one audience. First of all, it's written primarily for people who are engaged in going into marriage or close to engagement. Mm-hmm. Secondly, it's written for people who are married and want to strengthen their marriage. And thirdly, it's written for anybody who will ever get married at any time in their life. So I suggested parents buy this book for their children and they start educating them on these issues while they're young, while they're in their teenage years, so that they can form a realistic understanding of what marriage is, and also will help them in terms of identifying who they want to date and who they want to go out with. And it helps them come to an understanding of what their values are, the things that are important to them as you go through this questionnaire. Because I found that many people didn't even know what was important to them until after they got married, or they didn't articulate it, at least, what was important and how important it was until after they got married. Not only did they not identify it for themselves, they didn't identify it for the person they were entering marriage for. So this book will help you identify what qualities you're looking for in the person you want to marry.
What about a situation, scenario where a woman wants to marry someone and this individual has been married several times? Is that a red flag when an individual has been married several times. So you take someone like me, I've never been married, right?
Mhm.
And then everybody I meet, for the most part, have 100 wives. Well, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but have been married several times. Is that real? Is that realistic?
Well, let me say that it depends on the situation. Perhaps that person is a widow or a widower, and that's happened multiple times, and so they've been married multiple times because the death of their spouse. That's one scenario. The other scenarios are around person who simply got divorced multiple times, and certainly that is
The
something that
second
should be drilled.
scenario.
Yeah, that should be drilled down on. And again, there are questions here. So I asked questions in here about your prior marriage. What was the cause of the dissolution? Is that issue resolved? Uh, uh, so that the person going into it knows what kinds of issues came up repeatedly in that person's life. It is up to the other person to drill into the question until they're satisfied with the answer.
Mhm.
Uh, until they get an answer that they believe is legitimate and acceptable to them. But certainly, if a person's been married multiple times, it is certainly something that you should get detailed information on before you decide to go into another marriage with them.
I think it's a possible red flag myself, but I'm
Yeah.
not the expert, but I think it's
Well, I think generally it is a red flag.
mhm,
But again, the question is, what does it flag? And you want to know what the issue is.
mhm,
Maybe it was an
yeah,
infidelity issue. Maybe it was financial issues. Maybe it was issues with their family that kept entering into marriage. I mean, you need to know what is the root cause of this behavior that you find to not be acceptable. And the question is that resolved? Can I live with it? And
okay.
and and yeah.
I want to share with individuals some quick information on divorce. If you cannot resolve your marriage, you need to understand what the consequences are. There is going to be a division of assets and marital property. And if you have children, you're going to have to go through you're going to have to go to court, and there's going to have to be custody decisions made with your child. In Missouri is a state that favors custody of both parents, and the standard in Missouri and across the nation is what is the best interest of the child. Depending on what the finances are, you may have to pay spousal support, but you definitely are going to have to pay child support. So when you're contemplating divorce, you need to understand that there are legal consequences as well. And also, there is a division of retirement assets. If you were married for a period of time and this individual accumulated a certain amount of wealth during that marriage, and then you decide to get a divorce, those retirement monies will be divided for that spouse. And you cannot escape paying out some of your retirement for your ex-spouse. So you're going to have to look at the division of assets. What is marital property? What type of marital property is going to get divided? You're also going to have to look at some of the legal consequences of child custody, spousal support, child support, and that retirement fund. So it's not a situation where if it doesn't work, you can just walk away clean. And you're going to have to pay a lot of money as well for a family law attorney to work through all of these issues. Bishop Bass, you have done an outstanding job. I want you to
Attorney
have.
Stuart, can I say one thing
Sure,
on that particular
absolutely.
what you said? I think that what you just laid out was very good. And I think if you're marrying somebody who is divorced, that's information you need to know. So you need to know how much this person is paying out in child support, and what are the issues around property that's owned. Uh, and I lay out some of those questions in this book. So I tell you where I see a problem many times, and I've seen it recently in my church,
Okay.
where a person married a person, and the paperwork was not all in order, and the issues were not questioned. So when that person died, the person that married had an expectation that they were going to uh, uh, receive all the property, And they found out after marriage that there were documents or lack of documents that resulted in that property needing either to go to probate or going to children that were born in a prior marriage. Those are things that really need to be discussed ahead of time and everybody understand what's happening. What's going to happen to assets that you bring into the marriage if you were to die? That all need, and again, I'm talking about on a subsequent marriage. So what you laid out was very important, and it is information that anybody contemplating marriage, somebody who's been divorced, needs to really have answers to those questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are almost out of time. I want you to have the last few words as it relates to marriage in your book, and any information you would like to give our viewers on how they can obtain a copy of the book.
Let me say this, that having been married 52 years, I've just been blessed because, like most people, I entered into marriage, marrying a lovely woman who I was head over heels in love with. And we probably didn't discuss these questions in detail, and we were simply blessed to find each other in the world. We grew up in the same church. So I'm thankful for my marriage. But having been married, I understand how it's important that everybody will not be blessed to randomly enter into a marriage without detailed discussions. So I want to encourage people to have those discussions. But I thank God for my marriage. Secondly, this book is published by Westbow Press, and you can go on to westbowpress.com and get a copy of the book, or you can go on Amazon and get a copy of the book. It's both in paperback and hard copy. The paperback is $16.99. And again, you can get it from westbowpress.com, or you can get it from amazon.com. It is receiving great traction. A lot of people are buying it. And I do want to encourage anybody that buys it and reads the book, would you go on Amazon and put a book review there on there? I'd be most appreciative if you would do that. Thank you, Attorney Stuart, for this privilege and opportunity. I really consider it one. I appreciate you so much for giving me the opportunity to do this.
Well, thank you so much. It was an honor having you. You did a phenomenal job. I think the book is a must-have, and we hope that people read it. I'm going to go on Amazon and write a review for you because I did read it. And I think when you look at all of the divorces taking place today and people piling into law offices seeking a divorce, there is a tool out there that exists that can help you and give you hope at a time of trouble for you to make your marriage work. Go through this book, go through the exercises, pray, and it can happen. Thank you for tuning in to Legal Views with Attorney Sheila R. Stuart and our special guest, Bishop Edwin C. Bass. Thank you.
Welcome to Legal Views with your host, award-winning attorney, best in employment law,